Hey everybody. So last time you made a paper water lily. Um, so this time we're gonna do a little water lily painting slash drawing, still based on the artwork of Claude Monet. So take a look here. Here's Mr. Monet. He's a pretty well-known artist. You might have seen some of his paintings before. He invented sort of the or people called the way he painted Impressionism because he was really interested, maybe not always in making things super sharp and very detailed, but capturing how the light and the color worked in actual scenes. And so the Impressionists were really interested in light and color, and that is one of the things he's really well known for. Another thing that he's well known for is his house and garden that you can still go to today because they've kept it up. Um, he built this water garden with all these plants, and water lilies especially were important to some of his later paintings, and he was able to stay at home and paint all of these things from this garden that he built at his house. A lot of people wonder if his eyesight contributed somewhat to the way he painted, especially towards the end of his life. He had some problems with his eyes, and so may have created some of the way he saw color or even detail. So he did a ton of water lily paintings, and so there are many of those out there. We're going to look at a couple here, and I'll see if I can put these links in the description if you want to check this out. But you can kind of zoom in on some of these and see the brush strokes and everything. This is no substitute for going to a museum, but since you can't do that right now, uh, we'll go ahead and check it out and zoom in a little bit. But this is the one that we're going to think about right now, Bridge over a Pond of Water Lilies. And at the metmuseum.org, they have this on here, and they even have some little audio things that you can listen to that tell you a little bit about the painting. So if you want to check that out, you can do that, and I'll put that link in the description too. So let's go ahead and jump back over to the table, and we'll see what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is draw something that goes along with this idea of the bridge over the water lilies. So something like this is what we want to start with. So you're going to start with your paper. This is a 9x12 paper. You can do whatever size rectangle works for you. You can use crayons for this if you want to. We're going to do some watercoloring, so we want that resist to happen, especially down there in the water. I'm going to use oil pastels, and if you have some, I really encourage you to try those out because those oil pastels will blend a little bit more and resist the watercolor a little bit better too. So what we're going to do is divide our paper pretty much in half. Okay, and this is going to be the pond down here at the bottom, and this is going to be the background with the plants and things. So what I'm going to do is put a couple of triangle looking shapes here, and these are going to be some rocks, and that'll help us sort of show that the ground is there and that the pond kind of ends back here. It's like our horizon line. Okay, so we'll put a couple of rocks there, and then we will put in some kind of spiky grasses here. That'll be kind of cool. You can do this a lot of different ways, but this is the way I found works okay. And then we'll put some more bushes. We're just kind of outlining the basic shapes that we want. So kind of like a puffy cloud type of shape. And then you can put some trees in there too. So think about like a Y shape, and the trees also turn into more. They split and Ys, and that really works most of the time. So in a lot of the paintings, it's like a weeping willow tree back there. So these wouldn't really be that. These would be more like a different kind of tree. But we're gonna close that up, and we'll have plenty of trees in there, and then I'd even put some more layers in there. I'm going to leave a little bit of space in the background where we can have some blue sky show, but for the most part, I'm going to create trees and really have that all filled in with plant life. Okay, if you want to try kind of a weeping willow style tree, kind of put the trunk in there and then do these kind of curving lines that kind of curve down into the background. Okay, and so you can try that style tree as well. Okay, so that gives us kind of the basic outline of the background there. Okay, with those things, and we'll add some more color to this in just a little bit. Then we're going to add the water lilies. Okay, so we want to use ovals. Okay, shapes that are ellipses. Okay, towards the front, we're going to make them big. Okay, you can even put some of them off the page. If you keep them all on the page, it doesn't look very natural because at some point we have to assume that the plant or that the water goes off of the page. And so we would see a few water lilies going off. You can make some overlap each other, and that will give it some more realistic ideas. Okay, make it look a little more real. And then as you go back towards the back farther, start making the ovals a little bit smaller. Okay, and then they can be very small back here. We can have lots of them close together. And this creates the idea of perspective. Okay, so there's space in between them up here because they're closer to us, okay? And they're larger, and they're closer to us. And then as they go back, they seem to become smaller, okay? That's the illusion of space. And then there's less space in between them, okay? Because they're farther away. Everything is kind of going back and becoming, or at least it's looking smaller, okay, as it goes back to the back there, okay? So that gets us the basics, okay? And so now we're going to add some more color to it. So we're going to start to color these in a little bit. So I'll add some color. If you have a couple different kinds of greens, that would be great to add that and let those greens kind of blend together a little bit. And if you have some yellow, you can let the yellow sort of mix in there too. So you have yellow greens, and just use a lot of different colors. Okay, if we look at Monet's painting, if you flip back over to there, you'll see that he used tons of different colors. Okay, and he had the advantage of being able to mix all these different colors with the paint. We're using oil pastels for this, so we're going to be stuck with just the colors that we have in our oil pastel set, but we can at least mix them a little bit and try some of that. Don't be afraid to mix a little white into there too, and you'll get some different colors to your green. Why not try a little blue, okay, or even some purple in there as well, okay? It's okay to add just a little bit of some of these other colors into the water lilies as you do that, okay? And then don't forget, of course, you want the actual lily, okay? So white's going to be a little hard to see, but it won't be after we add the color. But if you want to, you can add the white first and then mix some other colors in there. So this is kind of a peach color. I'm sure you can hardly even see that on the screen, but you can try some other colors too. So maybe add a little red and make these lines go up, and then add the white to it to make it kind of a pink color. So what I'm sort of doing is going like this and making these flower petals. If you did the paper water lily project, you've already made a three-dimensional version of this water lily, so you should have some idea of what it's supposed to look like, and you can even add the middle parts to it. Okay, so we'll continue working on those and adding some of those into there. Okay, with the rocks, you can make them a different color than green if you want to. I like to kind of use a tan color and then maybe a little bit of brown as well as I start blending those rocks in, okay? And maybe even some orange. And I'll blend those colors together so I get a mix of different colors, okay? And I can add shadows with a little black if I want to. I would use very little black. In fact, Monet really never used black, almost never. I'm sure he probably used some a little bit, but a lot of people considered that black was not something that he ever wanted to add. So find a different color. Use a dark blue or a purple or something else. And if you want to, you can add a little green onto these rocks to make it seem like they're kind of moss covered rocks too. So you'll have this difference between the green of the water lilies and the greenish brown of the rocks, okay? Back here in the background, okay, we'll add some more texture. Since these are grasses, I'm gonna try to keep the lines showing a little bit, and I'll add some yellow and light green, and then maybe a little dark green, and I'm gonna try to keep the lines, okay, showing a little bit and not let everything blend in so that I can keep that kind of textured idea of the grasses going on there. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to mix in a few other things. If you add the orange, when it mixes with the green, it'll add a little bit of color into it, but when it mixes in with the green, it'll add some browns too, and then you're creating shadows, okay, darker colors without, again, using any black. So that would be one way to do that. And then continue working on adding more texture. Remember, texture is one, well, the way you move your crayon or your pencil around is another way to create interest in the picture. So I'm doing that kind of scribbling texture, and then that texture is gonna look different than the line texture, okay, that goes up and down with those, and it's going to look a little different than those other things. You can decide if you want your trees to be brown, okay, or if you want them to have white bark like a birch tree or something like that. So there's a ton of different things you can do to start completing this project, okay? If you want to add some sky in the background, you can do that. You can add some dark blue and some light blue together. Take a little bit of white and blend that in. If you want to focus on trying to make some clouds, then start with white and only add a tiny bit of blue onto it. So we're going to blend all those things together. When you do that willow tree, okay, try to almost do little leaves, okay, along the lines. Don't just keep all those lines coming down, but use those lines almost like a vine, and then add the leaves onto the line, and it'll give it a little bit more realistic look, okay? You're still gonna have all that texture and everything in there. So I'm gonna spend a little bit of time coloring this in a little bit more, and then I'll come back and show you maybe a last step before we get ready to do the watercolor on top of everything. So let me take a pause here. I'll work on this. It won't take any time for you. I'll be back in like 0 seconds. Okay, cool. So that didn't take very much time. Well, who knows how much time it took for me. Didn't take any time for you. So I've started to kind of get pretty close here. Just a couple of hints as you're working on your coloring. Some people will think about blending this with their hands or a towel or something, and I really kind of mostly caution people against doing that, but use the actual oil pastel to do the blending. So pick a light color like white or yellow and use that to blend colors. Now it's going to change the color a little bit, so you might not always want to do that. You may want to blend it a little bit with your finger or your hand, but a lot of times you're going to get a more interesting color if you take yellow or white or another color like a light green or something and blend those things together and smooth out things that way. And then don't be afraid to add some darker colors in to get some detail or some texture showing in the background. So if I want these trees to be mostly light green, still might not be a bad idea to add some dark green in there to get a little more detail into there, okay? Or even in some of these areas, add this purple, okay, as almost like an outlining color, okay? You don't necessarily need to outline, but that can help define the edges of your shapes a little bit without just getting a black and doing a black outline, but that kind of helps define the edges. So work with blue or purple as your shading or shadow colors or areas that you want to be darker, and try to keep the black out of it as much as possible. Okay, I think Monet would be happy with that. But there's probably an argument there every once in a while to add a little bit of black, but if you can help it, okay, try not to use very much black in there. Okay, when I'm down here working on the water lilies, the lily pads, I'm using yellow and white and those lighter greens towards the front here as much as possible. And then towards the back, I start using more blue and dark green and a little purple to make them a little darker as they go back into that space there. Okay, I'm still going to have a little bit of that blue and purple here in the front. That way it doesn't look like it came out of nowhere, but there's a little bit here and there, but mostly darker on the water lilies in the back and a little lighter here. And don't be afraid to add a little shading or shadowing to your water lilies as well, okay? When you're back here, there's no reason you can't have a little blue water lily every once in a while, but the actual lilies themselves will start to look more like just a little blob of color instead of really having an actual shape of a flower there. So don't be afraid to just add a little blob of color in there, okay? And so we're getting pretty close here. So the last thing I want to do before we get the paint out is take my white, okay, and I'm just going to add a few little highlights into the water here. So I'm just adding some little dashed lines, okay? And I'm only going to add a few of those. They'll be like little highlights on the water, just very short ones back here, almost like little dots, okay? You won't really be able to see them very well, and some longer ones up here towards the front, and then we'll mix up some paint and paint this to finish it up, okay? This might be like a one video project, okay? So we've got that all in there, although it might take you some time to do all this coloring, so maybe you want to stop and wait for a little bit. But let me get the paint and we'll see what happens. All right, so I got my paint ready to go. I'm using these tube watercolors again, but you can use the pan watercolors if you want. You just make sure you get plenty of water in there when you are mixing those up. One great way to get plenty of water in is to use a spray bottle to fill up whatever you're doing. You can spray that right onto those pan watercolors too, but I like these tube watercolors. They let me mix in a little bit more. So make sure you have plenty of paint mixed up. For just doing one picture, it's probably enough to just have one well, like in this little palette going on, but you could get a little cup and mix some more. And what I like to do is start at the back and start by painting that in, okay? And then I'm gonna go in a horizontal brush stroke for the most part. And then as my brush starts to run out of paint, I'm gonna keep painting for a while so that I get these really light, we call this dry brush, okay? These dry brush strokes at the front, and that's gonna make it look more like water because it's gonna let some white show through. So if I get a little bit more, then I'm gonna come back and start at the back again, okay? With that, and then let the dry brushing work towards the front. So I'll load my brush with plenty of water and start it back here so that I've got as much of the dark paint as possible in the back, and then I'll pull it down a little bit at a time and start letting that dry brushing work as I work towards the front, and that'll give me a kind of a cool effect. So start at the back and then work down towards the front with the dry brush, okay? And you might want to paint more of it in there, but I'm trying to keep the color lighter towards the front a little bit. And it's not really going to stick very well on your oil pastel, and that's exactly what we want. And you can see those little lines where we put the oil pastel are showing up as our highlights in the background, okay? So if you have a map down here, you can paint right off the side of your page. And if you're trying to be careful, you may have to go up and down, but try to grab a piece of newspaper, another piece of paper, and put it underneath so you can paint underneath it. So I'm gonna keep working on this. I'm almost done here. If you want to, you can sign your name before you paint over it, okay? Or you can let it dry and then sign your name afterwards, okay? I'll just grab this and do this right now, okay? There we go. I used a crayon, okay? And then we'll finish off that part, okay? You could even sign it in a different color if you want to. So we've got the right idea. We're finishing everything up. It looks pretty cool. We've got our Monet water lily garden, okay? Now, that's pretty cool, but you might actually want to have that Japanese bridge in there that it had in the actual picture. So why don't we add that part as the finishing touch? All right, cool. So here would be a good place to use those dark colors now, okay? And we're gonna make this curving bridge that goes across the page, okay? And you can have it actually go all the way off of the page. It's really the way that it looks best. Ooh, I got a little bit of oil pastel stuck underneath there. So the darker colors are the ones that you're gonna want here, okay? And this is probably the time when you actually do get out your black and start adding that dark color right on top of everything, okay? You can go back and lighten this up in a little bit, okay? So I do 2 parts across there, and then if you want to make it look more 3-dimensional, okay, then make one underneath, okay? And then you're gonna have these lines go across the top and the bottom one, okay? And then these lines go in between here, so they look a little bit farther away, okay? And that makes that 3-dimensional look there. And then you can kind of make the bottom of the bridge look a little bit thicker, and you get the idea. So you might even want to grab your white and lighten up the bridge too, so you can blend that together, and then you can actually get the white and the black going together, and you can create some cool effects that way with almost a shading type look to the bridge, so that the area that's nearer to you has a lighter color. Okay, you can mix in some blue or some other colors in there too, and then the area that's farther away will be the darker one. So that gives us this kind of cool effect for the bridge. And we've got it. Okay, so cool. Monet's Japanese bridge with our oil pastels and watercolors. I know that was a little bit of a longer video, but at least it got you all the way through in one session. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.